My name is Melissa, and the story I'm about to share is one of the hardest things I've ever had to talk about. It isn't just about losing a house or dealing with family, it's about betrayal, pride, and the strange way life sometimes turns the tables when you least expect it. For a long time, I thought the people who were supposed to protect me, to love me the most, had broken me beyond repair. But I also learned that sometimes, fate has a way of writing a better ending than the one you imagined. Before I go any further, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell icon so you never miss a story, and please leave your thoughts in the comments below because I really love reading what you all think. Okay, let me start from the beginning. I was never the golden child in my family. I wasn't the daughter who made straight A's in school, or the one who followed the exact life script my parents had pictured. I tried so hard to make them proud. But no matter what I did, it always felt like I fell short of their expectations. When I finally grew older, I stopped living to please them and decided to carve out my own life. That's when I threw myself into work. I worked long hours, took on jobs nobody else wanted, saved every penny, and denied myself luxuries for years. And one day, all of that hard work turned into something real. I signed the papers on my very first house. It wasn't a mansion, not even close. It was a modest little place, with creaky floors and a tiny backyard, but it was mine. My name was on the deed. I had earned it. I can still remember the feeling of turning the key in the lock that first time, walking inside, and just standing there in the empty living room thinking, this is mine. This is my space. This is proof I can do it on my own. You'd think my parents would have been proud. That they'd smile and maybe, for once, tell me they were happy for me. But their reaction wasn't pride, it was criticism. My mom frowned and said, "It's kind of small, don't you think?" My dad smirked and muttered, "Let's see how long you manage to keep it." It was like every ounce of joy I felt got cut in half by their words. Still, I told myself maybe they just didn't know how to express pride, maybe deep down they were impressed. I clung to that hope, because what else could I do? For a while, life was good. I had my little home, my independence, my sanctuary. Then, about 2 years later, I got an offer to work abroad for 6 months. It was a huge career move, something that could change everything for me. After weighing the pros and cons, I decided to go. I set everything up carefully before I left. My bills were on autopay, my place was locked and safe, and I left with the comfort that when I came back, my home would still be there waiting. But when I returned, it was gone. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had just landed after a long flight, dragging my suitcase behind me, exhausted but excited to go home. I walked up the little path I'd walked 100 times before, the key in my hand, and then the door opened. And it wasn't me opening it. A couple stood there, looking at me like I was the intruder. Confused, I said, "Excuse me. I think there's some mistake. This is my house." The woman looked at me with pity, and the man shook his head gently. "I'm sorry," he said, "but this house belongs to us. We bought it last month. We have the papers." My stomach dropped. My vision blurred. Bought it? No, that wasn't possible. I never put it on the market. My heart was pounding as I stumbled back, muttering that there had to be a mistake. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I already knew who had done this. The next morning, I stormed over to my parents' place. I didn't even knock, I just walked in and demanded, "What did you do?" And they didn't even look guilty. My mom calmly sipped her tea and said, "Melissa, don't overreact. You weren't even here. The house was just sitting there empty. It made sense to sell it." Made sense? My house? The one I spent years working for? My dad added, "Besides, we needed the money. We're your parents, you should be happy to help." Happy? To help? By robbing me of the one thing I had worked so hard to achieve? My hands shook, my throat closed, and I could barely get the words out. "It wasn't yours to sell," I whispered. "It was mine." But they didn't care. They looked at me like I was being selfish, dramatic. And in that moment, I felt more betrayed than I ever had in my entire life. I left their house shaking, tears streaming down my face, and for days I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept seeing myself the day I bought the house, proudly holding the keys, thinking I had finally made it. And now, it was gone. It wasn't just about a building. It was about independence. It was about proof that I wasn't a failure. And they had taken that from me without a second thought. I tried to fight it. I looked into legal options, but because they were my parents and had been able to access certain documents while I was abroad, they had found a way to make it look legitimate. My lawyer told me it would take years of battling, and even then, the chances weren't great. I didn't have the strength for that. So I let it go. I didn't forgive them, I couldn't, but I let the house go. I threw myself back into work, using the pain as fuel. And here's the twist I never saw coming. The company I worked for abroad had been so impressed with my dedication that they offered me a higher position, a leadership role in one of their main branches back home. I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, people saw my worth without questioning it. They valued me. They trusted me with responsibility. And when I accepted the role and walked into the office on my first day, dressed in my new suit, heart pounding with excitement and nerves, I saw two very familiar faces sitting at desks in the corner. My parents. They worked there. And in that moment, I realized something so ironic it almost made me laugh. The same parents who mocked me, dismissed me, and stole from me were now about to discover that their new boss was me. When I saw them sitting there in that office, for a second I thought I was imagining it. My parents, the same people who had taken everything from me, were right there, typing away like ordinary employees. They didn't notice me at first, and I stood frozen near the doorway, clutching my folder tightly against my chest. I could almost hear my heart beating louder than the chatter in the room. Then, as if it were some kind of cruel twist of fate, my mom looked up. Her eyes widened, and then her face froze in disbelief. My dad turned a moment later, and when he saw me, his jaw actually dropped. I walked further inside, trying to hide the storm of emotions bubbling inside me. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady, though inside I was trembling. I could feel everyone else's eyes on me, waiting, curious, not understanding the tension in the air. The manager who had been showing me around smiled and said proudly, "Everyone, meet Melissa. She'll be your new branch director." I wish I could describe the look on my parents' faces in that moment. Shock. Embarrassment. Maybe even fear. They were speechless. And me? For once, I didn't shrink under their gaze. I didn't fumble or feel small. I stood taller. The rest of the introductions blurred by because my focus was entirely on them. I kept replaying the memory of my dad smirking, telling me I'd never hold on to my house. Of my mom saying I should be happy to help when they sold it. And now here they were, sitting at desks, about to report to me. That first day, I focused on my work as much as I could. I wanted to prove, not just to them, but to myself, that I was capable of being a leader. I gave a presentation, discussed new strategies, and assigned responsibilities. Every so often, my eyes drifted to my parents. My mom looked pale, nervously clicking her pen, while my dad kept avoiding eye contact. It was strange. These were the same people who had never taken me seriously, who had always seen me as less, and now they couldn't even meet my gaze. When the day finally ended, I walked out of the office with my head high. But as soon as I got home, I collapsed onto the couch, shaking. It was overwhelming, everything hitting me all at once. I wanted to scream, to cry, to laugh. Life had flipped upside down in the most unexpected way. The next morning, I braced myself before stepping into the office again. I had no idea how they were going to act, but I was determined not to let them intimidate me. To my surprise, they were almost polite. My mom gave me a stiff nod, and my dad muttered a quiet morning. It was awkward, but I kept things professional. I wasn't going to let my personal feelings cloud my work. But of course, it wasn't that simple. Later that week, my dad came into my office. He closed the door behind him, and for the first time in my life, I saw something almost like uncertainty in his eyes. "Melissa," he started, clearing his throat. "About everything. The house, I mean. Maybe we acted too quickly. But you have to understand, we needed the money. We thought you'd be fine." I stared at him in disbelief. That was his version of an apology? My voice was cold when I answered, "You stole from me. You didn't ask. You didn't care what it meant to me. You didn't even think twice before taking away something I worked years for." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We're your parents. We figured, what's yours is ours." Those words hit me like a slap. What's yours is ours. It explained everything, didn't it? They had never seen me as my own person, only as an extension of themselves, someone whose achievements or belongings could be claimed without permission. "I'm not your child in this office," I told him firmly. "I'm your boss. If you can't handle that, maybe you should reconsider working here." His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but no words came out. He just left the room, slamming the door harder than necessary. For a while, things were tense but manageable. They did their jobs, though I could tell they hated taking instructions from me. My mom especially, she would roll her eyes in meetings, or mutter under her breath when I announced changes. But I ignored it. I wasn't going to stoop to their level. Then came the day of the quarterly review. I had to evaluate all the employees, including my parents. It felt surreal, sitting there with their files in front of me. My mom walked in first, arms crossed, chin lifted high like she was daring me to criticize her. I went through the standard questions, keeping my tone neutral. But when I gave her feedback about areas she needed to improve, she snapped, "You've always thought you're better than me, haven't you? Just because you have this position now." I cut her off. "This isn't personal. This is work. If you can't separate the two, then this isn't going to work out." Her face turned red, but she didn't say another word. When my dad came in afterward, he was quieter, more subdued. I could tell he hated the situation just as much, but unlike my mom, he wasn't going to openly fight me. Still, the resentment lingered in the air. At night, I lay awake thinking about everything. Part of me felt guilty. These were still my parents, after all. But another part of me whispered that maybe this was justice. Maybe life was finally showing them what it felt like to be powerless, to be treated as less, the way they had always treated me. One afternoon, I overheard my mom complaining to one of the other employees, saying things like, "She only got this job because of luck and she doesn't know what she's doing." My chest burned with anger, but instead of confronting her then and there, I decided to let her words roll off me. Actions would prove everything. And they did. Over the next few months, the branch started performing better than it had in years. Our numbers went up, clients were happier, and headquarters praised my leadership. Every time I shared those results in meetings, I couldn't help but glance at my parents. The bitterness on their faces was obvious, but so was the undeniable truth. They couldn't argue with the success. Still, the distance between us outside of work grew larger. I stopped visiting them at home. I stopped answering their casual calls. Every interaction we had was limited to the office, and even then, it was stiff and uncomfortable. Sometimes I wondered if we'd ever find a way back to being a family again. But then, something happened that forced everything to the surface. A mistake. A big one. My mom mishandled a major client account. Documents went missing, deadlines were missed, and the client threatened to pull their contract. It could have cost the company thousands. I had to step in personally to fix it, working late nights to salvage the relationship. When the dust settled, I called her into my office. She sat there, arms folded, glaring at me like a child being scolded. "Do you have any idea how close you came to losing that client?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Her response stunned me. "Maybe if you weren't so busy trying to prove you're better than everyone, this wouldn't have happened." I stared at her, speechless. It wasn't just denial, it was resentment, pure and sharp. That was the moment I realized something. No matter what I did, no matter how much I proved myself, they would never see me differently. They would never respect me, not truly. And yet, deep inside, a part of me still wanted them to. A part of me still longed for them to say, "We're proud of you." The day my mom stormed out of my office after that disastrous meeting, I sat alone staring at the closed door for what felt like hours. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how much I achieved, no matter how much evidence there was of my success, they would never give me what I'd been craving all my life, a shred of acknowledgement. It hurt, even if I didn't want to admit it. These were my parents. I should have been used to their coldness by now, but in some hidden part of me, that little girl still existed, the one who used to bring home drawings from school, only to have them brushed aside with a dismissive comment. The one who dreamed they'd clap for her someday. That night, I sat in my apartment, sipping tea that had long gone cold. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation over and over, twisting it in circles. Maybe I should have been gentler. Maybe I should have tried harder to see things from their perspective. But then again, hadn't I spent my whole life doing exactly that? Hadn't I always bent over backwards to win their approval, only to end up hurt again and again? The next morning, I went into the office with a pit in my stomach. I avoided looking at their desks when I walked past, keeping my focus on the stack of reports waiting for me. But whispers were already spreading. People had overheard enough of the tension between me and my parents to start speculating. A couple of coworkers who had always been friendly with me now looked at me with wary curiosity. Office gossip, it was inevitable. Around lunchtime, my dad came to my office. He didn't close the door this time. He just leaned against the frame, looking tired. "Melissa," he said softly. His tone was different, less defensive, almost resigned. "Your mom's upset. She feels like you're targeting her." I clenched my jaw. "I'm not targeting her. I'm holding her accountable, the same as I would anyone else." He nodded slowly, rubbing his forehead. "I know. But she doesn't see it that way. She's not used to." His voice trailed off, but I knew what he meant. She wasn't used to me having authority. She wasn't used to me being the one in control. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to ask if either of them had ever considered how I felt all those years being dismissed, ignored, laughed at. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just said quietly, "Then maybe it's time she got used to it." He looked at me for a long moment before walking away, and I was left wondering if he'd finally understood, or if he never would. Weeks passed, and though my mom's mistake with the client had been resolved, the damage lingered. I noticed the way other employees hesitated around her now, double-checking her work, avoiding depending on her too much. She hated it, I could tell. And instead of channeling that frustration into doing better, she seemed to sink deeper into bitterness. Every meeting became a minefield. Every instruction I gave was met with either sarcasm or stony silence. It was exhausting. At the end of each day, I felt drained, like I'd been carrying a weight too heavy for one person. But I kept reminding myself why I was here. This job was my chance to prove to myself that I was capable, independent, worthy. I couldn't let them break me again. One Friday evening, just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed with a message from my aunt, my mom's sister. She rarely contacted me, so I hesitated before opening it. "Melissa, I don't know what's going on between you and your parents, but please remember they're under a lot of pressure. They've been telling the family that you're making their lives difficult at work. Maybe try to ease up." I stared at the screen, stunned. Not only were they making me out to be the villain at the office, they were painting me as cruel to the entire extended family too. A surge of anger rushed through me, hot and bitter. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. I typed another, deleted it too. In the end, I just set the phone down and cried. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. I was doing everything right, yet somehow, I was still the bad guy in their story. The next Monday, I walked into the office determined not to let emotions control me. But the tension had become impossible to ignore. Even other employees were beginning to sense it. During a team briefing, one of them glanced nervously between me and my mom, as if expecting an explosion at any second. That was when I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep going like this, not for me, not for the company. So, later that afternoon, I called them both into my office. My heart raced as they sat down, side by side, stiff and defensive like two people preparing for battle. "I need to say this once," I began, my voice steady though my palms were sweating. This is a workplace. I am your boss here, not your daughter. That means I will treat you as I treat every other employee. I will praise you when you do well, and I will call you out when you make mistakes. If you can't handle that, then maybe this isn't the right place for you." My mom scoffed immediately. "So you're threatening to fire your own parents now? After everything we've done for you?" I bit back the urge to laugh bitterly. "Everything you've done for me? You mean selling my house without asking? Leaving me with nothing?" Her face flushed, but she didn't answer. My dad shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. "This isn't about family anymore," I said firmly. "This is about professionalism. I've worked too hard to let anyone, family or not, jeopardize my position. You need to decide if you can handle this arrangement." For a moment, the room was silent. Then my dad said quietly, "We'll do our jobs." My mom muttered something under her breath, but he shot her a look, and she fell silent. That was the closest thing to an agreement I was going to get. After they left, I leaned back in my chair, my whole body trembling. It wasn't victory. It didn't feel like victory at all. It felt like drawing a line in the sand, knowing the waves would eventually wash over it anyway. But at least for now, I had said what needed to be said. Things improved slightly after that. They kept their distance, did their work without too much fuss. But the air between us was thick with unspoken words, and every family dinner invitation went unanswered. We had become co-workers, nothing more. One evening, as I stayed late finishing reports, I found myself staring out the office window at the city lights. My reflection looked back at me in the glass, tired, older somehow, but also stronger. For the first time, I realized something important. Maybe I would never get their approval. Maybe they would never change. But I didn't need them to anymore. I had built something for myself, something they couldn't take away. I thought about my house, the one they sold. At first, losing it felt like losing a piece of my identity. But sitting there, I realized I was more than four walls. I was resilience, determination, independence. That house might have been gone, but I was still here. And I wasn't going anywhere. Still, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. That somehow, my parents weren't done trying to undermine me. And as it turned out, I was right. Because just when I thought I'd finally found balance, a revelation came along that changed everything all over again. Just when I thought I had finally carved out some fragile sense of stability, life decided to throw me another curveball. It started innocently enough, with a company-wide email from the board of directors announcing a mandatory meeting the following week. Normally, those meetings were routine, updates, progress reports, maybe a motivational speech or two. But the tone of this message was different. It felt weighty, almost foreboding. I brushed it off at first, telling myself not to overthink it. But deep down, my instincts told me something big was coming. Over the next few days, I noticed little things, whispered conversations between senior staff members, the subtle air of anticipation hanging over the office. Even my dad seemed unusually tense, though he tried to hide it. My mom, on the other hand, carried herself with a smugness I hadn't seen in weeks, as if she knew something I didn't. By the time the day of the meeting arrived, my nerves were shot. I walked into the large conference room, trying to project confidence even though my stomach was in knots. The entire company was gathered, filling every seat. At the front of the room stood Mr. Hayes, one of the most respected members of the board. He was an older man, sharp-eyed and meticulous, the kind of person who didn't waste time on theatrics. He cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but commanding, "as you all know, this company is evolving. We are entering a new chapter, one that requires strong leadership and clear vision. After much deliberation, the board has made a significant decision regarding management structure." My heart pounded. Around me, people shifted in their seats, eyes wide with curiosity. Mr. Hayes continued, "Effective immediately, we will be implementing a dual leadership model for this branch. One executive will oversee client relations and operations. The other will manage finance and strategy. These roles will carry equal authority, with both leaders reporting directly to the board." A murmur rippled through the room. Dual leadership? That was unprecedented. I sat up straighter, trying to mask my growing unease. "And," Mr. Hayes said, pausing for dramatic effect, "I am pleased to announce the two individuals chosen for these roles, Melissa and her father, Richard." For a moment, the world tilted on its axis. I heard my name, then my dad's, but the words didn't make sense. Equal authority? With him? The room erupted in polite applause, though I could sense the tension beneath it. My dad rose to his feet, beaming, shaking hands with nearby colleagues. My mom looked like she'd just won the lottery, her smirk practically glowing across the room. Meanwhile, I sat frozen, my smile plastered on like a mask, my insides boiling. When the meeting ended, I retreated to my office as quickly as possible. I shut the door and just sat there, staring at the wall. Equal authority. After everything, after clawing my way up, proving myself, surviving their constant undermining, I was now being forced to share power with the very man who had mocked me, dismissed me, and sold my home without a second thought. It wasn't just frustrating. It felt like betrayal. Later that evening, my dad came into my office, his face alight with excitement. "Can you believe it? Equal partners. This is the chance for us to show the board what we can do together." I looked at him, struggling to contain my emotions. "Together? You've done nothing but fight me every step of the way. And now you think we're just going to magically become a team?" He frowned, clearly annoyed by my lack of enthusiasm. "Melissa, this is bigger than you. The board trusts us both. You should be grateful. Do you realize how rare this opportunity is?" Grateful. The word stung like a slap. I should be grateful that after years of belittlement, I was now forced to stand shoulder to shoulder with the very person who caused so much of my pain. I wanted to scream, but instead I just said coldly, "I'll do my job." That's all. The following weeks were a nightmare. The dual leadership structure created confusion and tension throughout the company. Employees didn't know whose direction to follow. My dad and I disagreed constantly about budgets, about strategy, about how to handle clients. Every meeting turned into a battlefield, with both of us trying to assert authority. And my mom? She reveled in it. She strutted around the office like she owned the place, dropping little comments to anyone who would listen about how the family was finally running things again. One night, after a particularly heated argument with my dad over a major contract, I found myself driving aimlessly through the city, tears blurring my vision. I pulled over near a quiet park and sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel. I thought about everything I had endured, the sacrifices, the long nights, the endless effort to build a life for myself. And now, it felt like all of it was slipping through my fingers, twisted into some cruel joke. But as I sat there, something inside me shifted. I realized that as much as I wanted their approval, I didn't actually need it anymore. What I needed was to protect what I had built, to prove not to them, but to myself, that I could rise above this. If they wanted to play power games, fine. I would play too. But I would do it smarter. So I started paying closer attention. I documented everything, every decision, every meeting, every email. I kept meticulous records, building a case piece by piece. I noticed patterns, flaws in my dad's approach that I could subtly highlight without openly attacking him. I worked harder than ever, but this time with a new kind of clarity. And then, one afternoon, it happened. We were in a board review meeting, presenting updates on our respective departments. My dad had been pushing a risky investment plan, one that I knew was shaky at best. I had tried to warn him privately, but he brushed me off. "You're too cautious," he'd said. "Sometimes you have to take risks to win big." As he presented, I watched the board members' faces. At first, they nodded politely. But when I asked a few pointed questions, calm, professional, but direct, the cracks in his plan began to show. Numbers didn't add up. Projections were overly optimistic. Within minutes, the board's confidence shifted. Finally, Mr. Hayes turned to me. "Melissa, what is your perspective on this?" I took a deep breath, my hands steady even though my heart raced. "With respect, I believe this plan exposes us to unnecessary risk. Based on current market trends and the data I've gathered, there's a high probability of loss. I recommend an alternative strategy that prioritizes long-term stability." I handed out copies of my analysis, which I had prepared in advance. As the board members flipped through the pages, I could see the tide turning. By the end of the meeting, my dad's proposal had been rejected outright, and my plan was unanimously approved. The look on his face was one I'll never forget: shock, then anger, then something else. Something almost like fear. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I finally allowed myself a small, tired smile. For the first time, I felt the scales tipping in my favor. But I also knew this battle was far from over. My parents weren't the kind to give up easily. And deep down, I sensed that the storm was only just beginning. In the days that followed the board meeting, I could feel a shift in the air. People in the office started looking at me differently. Where once they hesitated, unsure of whether to follow my lead or my father's, now they seemed to gravitate naturally toward me.